All right. This episode's prospect profile. So we are running through every single possible, or at least halfway likely, Red Wings 4th overall pick. And this is one that we've covered before in terms of a prospect profile, but not with the deeper analysis and the context of, this is a guy you might reasonably expect to hear Steve Yzerman call out at 4th overall. So we'll talk a little bit about likelihood. We'll talk about where he fits in the system. Some of it will be an overlap, but still that's okay because he's an exciting prospect, none other than defenseman Jamie Drysdale. In my opinion, the best defenseman in the draft. There's some who will advocate for primarily Jake Sanderson, but nonetheless, you guys know who Jamie Drysdale is. Brad, take us away.
So we talked recently in our prospect profile about what Jamie Drysdale is. So a quick recap for those of you who missed that episode. High skill, high offense, all around, terrific defenseman, slightly undersized, right-handed shooting, right D, close to a point per game in the OHL this year. Fantastic skater, fantastic transition defenseman, still strong defensively and still strong offensively. The complete package. The only question with him is what is his ultimate upside? Because is he going to be Erik Karlsson? Is he going to be Drew Doughty? Is he going to be Jeff Petrie? We don't know. Yeah, all great options and a very, very likely candidate to be good and not bust. But we don't know. But again, without beating that dead horse, what would Jamie Drysdale mean if he gets drafted by the Red Wings? Because this is the most fascinating discussion in terms of organizational need in terms of this draft. Because I would argue the Red Wings' depth on the roster and in prospects sucks everywhere but right D. Because currently on the projected opening lineup for next year, you're going to have Hronek, Seider, Bowie, Biega for right-handed shooting defenseman's options. Say what you want about Biega or Bowie, but whatever. They're short-term and they can fit in on the right side for now. Drysdale wouldn't play next year. Then in the system beyond that, you also have Antti Tuomisto. So if you're big on Tuomisto, and obviously we're big on Seider and Hronek, there's your right side for the next half decade to decade. It's pretty set in. Adding Drysdale to that's not necessarily a bad thing. You want competition, you want flexibility, because there's no guarantee Seider or Tuomisto pan out. The way their production and their growth has gone since they've been drafted, in the year since they've been drafted, it's promising. It's positive. I don't think anybody's betting against them yet. But you never know. So Drysdale adds another layer of insurance to that. The Red Wings did tinker with Filip Hronek on the left side during this season as well. Don't know that I love that, but that's always an option as well. Defensemen don't have to be married to their strong side, even though it is a heavy advantage to do it. It's as much as I love Drysdale and as much as I love his offensive upside more than every other defenseman in the Red Wings system currently, it would be kind of hard to stomach that pick knowing that literally every other position is a much bigger need right now. They're not looking stacked at left wing. They're not looking stacked at center. They're not looking stacked at right wing. They're not looking stacked at left D, and they're not looking stacked at net. Not that I'm advocating to pick Askarov, just saying. The only other position you could argue might be a position of strength for them would be left wing. But none of the guys we're really considering here are left wingers, if you believe Cole Perfetti's a center. So it's fascinating. It's interesting. If they truly believe far and away he's the best player available at number 4, they absolutely should take him. But if there's a debate or if there's a tie, I don't think it should go to him.
All right. Drysdale, the player, like you said, Brad, we've covered him before. The reason he stands out for me is because his skating is like cerebral. And as someone who's had to eat shit every time I watch Quinn Hughes play hockey because he was not my first or second favorite pick for Detroit that year.
Did you notice Evan's face as when you said, as someone who? Because he definitely thought you were going somewhere else with that statement.
I got my bingo dabber out.
You watch what makes Quinn Hughes able to overcome any kind of deficiencies that people projected that he has. Besides, elite skill, the way he skates is up there. And Drysdale has that in spades. I believe this guy is the best defenseman in the draft. I believe his offensive ability, his transition game, the way he's able to kind of quarterback the play either on the power play or just entering the offensive zone or working the blue line, phenomenal. That's what sets him apart. I don't think he's bad defensively. I don't think he's a phenomenal defender, but you look at a guy you want in your first pairing, that's kind of the way it shakes out in the modern NHL. More to what Brad said, he fits into that Sanderson category for me. Like, taking Drysdale is almost like an implicit, yeah, we took Seider last year, but he might not be a first pairing defenseman. And do you do that? Do you, because not both of those guys are going to play on the top pairing, or one of them's going to have to flip to their weak side. And as you've alluded to, it's not always, they can't always do that. It doesn't always shake out that way. Not saying they can't, but you draft a guy at that level, at that, fourth overall, or possibly a top 3 pick in terms of talent, you want to play them at their position of strength. So do you take a right-handed defenseman when you just did it? Same question I have with Sanderson. Do you take a defenseman with the same mold as Seider when you just did that in the face of all that other need? That's my thing. I like Jamie Drysdale. I think he'll be a fantastic defenseman. And are we getting too galaxy brain by saying, no, the puzzle has to be built with these pieces in this specific order? Or do we say, yeah, we just took Seider. Doesn't mean another good right-handed defenseman can't exist. And if we think he's the best player, we'll take him. And then in 5 years, we'll figure out if this conversation is even still relevant. I don't know. I don't envy Steve Yzerman.
So 2 things. I'm still a big believer in the philosophy of you take the best player on your board. If you truly believe Jamie Drysdale is the best player there when you are drafting, you take him. Positional need be damned. I don't care if they have 9 right-handed shooting defensemen in the system. If he is truly the best, you take him. But let's assume and this draft is a great example of this, where there's legitimately 6 guys that could go in this number 4 spot, and talent-wise, there is not a huge gap between them. So Detroit could very reasonably find themselves in a spot where they're like, okay, we can actually pick our poison here in terms of positioning. And we love to tout what Steve Yzerman's done in Tampa Bay, so it's worth looking at how Tampa Bay is constructed. Now, not all their players came via the draft, et cetera, but the current roster that they're throwing out there in the Cup Finals, almost every single one of their defensemen was taken in the first round, and 0 of their forwards were taken in the first round. The only first round forward they would have had he not been injured is Steven Stamkos. So if Yzerman truly believes, and this draft might be a perfect example of it, that he's going to get good offensive talent in the second round and the later rounds, yeah, we're going to get our defensemen now, and we'll swing for a bunch of forwards later. That's possible. This is how Tampa is constructed. I mean, they didn't draft Sergachev, but they gave up one of their first-round picks to acquire a first-round defenseman. They didn't draft Ryan McDonough, but they gave up a first-round forward and Brett Howden as part of a package to get Ryan McDonough. So even if you say they didn't draft these defensemen first overall, they gave up first-round picks for these defensemen. So in a circular way, it still adds up. They got lucky, and there's no way around it. They got lucky that Kucherov and Point fell to where they got them, and the Red Wings absolutely cannot bank on that, because looking back at it, hindsight 2020, those guys should have never went to the second and third round, because sometimes guys just progress out of nowhere and randomly get a lot better. Tyler Bertuzzi is a great example of that. These guys were among the top producers in their draft years. They just had, Kucherov had the Russian factor and Point had the skating factor, but they were producing. So hindsight 2020, it was dumb they fell. But look at the rest. Yanni Gourde, undrafted free agent. Andre Palat was a 5th or a 6th round pick. Tyler Johnson was undrafted. I mean, they found a lot of value outside of the first round, even beyond Kucherov and Point. I don't know if I love this theory, but it worked in Tampa. History has shown it's easier to project forwards in the first round than it is defensemen. Okay, so what does Yzerman believe here? Now, in his very short history with the Red Wings, he drafted defensemen with 3 of his first 4 picks last year. What does that mean for this draft? Absolutely nothing, because you can read into it both ways. Oh, they got their defenseman last year. They don't need to worry about Drysdale this year. Or they really value defensemen. They're going to value him again this year. So Drysdale's the ultimate wild card, and the way Yzerman's conducted business doesn't make you think that Drysdale's out of the question.
Evan, are any words left for you here, or have they been robbed from you again?
I think there's like 3 words left on the final page of the thesaurus that I could potentially add. But I think you're all in the right, thinking that Drysdale's a potential target. Why wouldn't he be? You watch him play and you see shades of some of the top young defensemen in the league right now, and to have one of those in Detroit would be awesome. But I think a forward is what is needed right now, because we really need someone to really drive the offense. Not saying Drysdale wouldn't, but we need a forward who's going to be doing that.
Yeah, the thing here is that this is a mixture because of the actual circumstance and the fact that we've had a billion years to think about this draft. But there are so many possible avenues that all lead to good to great to perfect options for the Red Wings. And busts, of course. But like Brad said, 6 or 7 players here, and the margin between them is so thin. You can prescribe to the theory that, yeah, of course you'd want a forward here, but if you believe this defenseman is the best, then you deal with the forwards later, or you go with what Evan just said, which is that, yeah, that top defenseman would be nice, but you don't have any support talent or any true superstar talent, and you'd rather go for that. It's a tough decision, and there's so much future projection in it. And all I keep thinking about every single time I start to rank and analyze and project the draft is that I do not envy Steve Yzerman. It's good for us as fans and as talking heads, because there's a lot of avenues where I'm happy here. And I think that's something that comes from the fact that we were broken by the Seider pick last year, because that came so far out of left field. But it also adds a layer of complexity, because like you don't want to be the team that misses out on Quinn Hughes, and you certainly don't want to be the team that misses out on Quinn Hughes twice, right? So you try to learn from that and say, what did I do wrong where I missed such an obviously good pick?
But if you miss a Quinn Hughes and end up with an Elias Pettersson, you're not devastated.
Yeah, and the cruel fact of that is Jim Benning got both of them, so here's the hockey gods for you.
But could Lucas Raymond be Elias Pettersson? Maybe. Not betting on it, but maybe. Nobody was betting on Elias Pettersson to be Elias Pettersson when he was picked, or else he would have went first, and he went 5th.
Well, so the story goes is that the Red Wings bet on Elias Pettersson being Elias Pettersson.
I think in our mock draft we had him falling to 9 that year, and I'm crushed now.
I think we've grown a lot because we did a lot of hopeful mock drafts. A lot of stuff.
Now we're like now we do our mock drafts like, okay, we have to do this. How are the teams ahead of us going to absolutely screw us? Now, just a small thought as we're getting so far into the weeds and all these prospects and Drysdale again. A thought I had. What the hell would this podcast have been for the last 2.5 months if we won the draft lottery? Like really, what would we have done?
Analyzing every player ranked 20 and later, and pretty much assigning the same kind of hype to them at pick 32 as we are at pick 4.
We literally would have had episode breakdowns based on Lafreniere's skill set. And today we are covering Alexis Lafreniere's backhand.
Like that, but unironically. It's either that or like Emile Andre. Here's his 4th game of the preseason and his 12-year-old year playing AAA hockey. Like that's the level we would have gotten to. We would have given Evan a lot more leeway for golf, you a lot more leeway for Josh Allen, and me a lot more leeway for just like empty whining into the void.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.